We're going to get Hamas fighters. We're going to get Palestinian Islamic Jihad members. We're going to get radical, hardened, militant Islamists to come into America.
Hello and welcome to GB News America. My name is Stephen Edgington. As anti-Semitism and radical Islam spread across the West, I'm joined by the Muslim-turned-Christian author Ayaan Hirsi Ali to discuss the threat posed by Islamism to America. What is da'wah?
Da'wah means literally to call or to invite non-Muslims to Islam. It also means to Islamize institutions. Now, in the modern times, what da'wah means has broadened to start first by getting Muslims to practice Islam, and it's to command right and forbid wrong. I'll explain that. It's a very important principle in Islam. And so first it is to get existing Muslims and turn them from just being people who identify as Muslim and worship Allah, and turn them into activists, turn them into those who command right and forbid wrong within Muslim communities, invite non-Muslims to Islam, and institutionalize, and change institutions, convert institutions to become Islamic and apply Sharia law. In short, it is a very ambitious project to bring the world under Muslim dominion.
Is this happening in the United States?
It is happening under the United States and has been happening for many, many years. And within Islamists, I think the first and most important thing for me to do is to make a distinction between those Muslims who practice da'wah, who are activists, and whose ambition and goal is to see Sharia law, Islamic law applied everywhere, and distinguish them from ordinary Muslims, peace-loving Muslims, who are not interested in Islamizing anyone or anything. So if you have that distinction, the activist Muslims versus, for now I'll just call them peace-loving Muslims. So the interesting group are the activist Muslims. And have they been active in the United States? Yes, for decades. Now, among activist Muslims, there are different views on how to get to the objective of bringing about Sharia in society. You start on the micro and you go all the way to global. And one group believe in the use of force or jihad, and then there's a group that says they have the long view, which is to persuade, to institutionalize Sharia, to get majorities to voluntarily accept and then transform a society from within. And then there's a hybrid group. And so the question to do we have da'wah in America is, do we have all three viewpoints existing in America? Yes. And the first group, those ones who tried to accomplish it through force, I think have been, for the moment, been sidelined, and they have learned from the experience of the demolition of Al-Qaeda, of ISIS, and of other violent groups by the American military and other Western militaries. And so that group, I think, have been persuaded by the other two groups to adopt the more gradualist, long-term agenda of Islamizing slowly through institutions, through schools, through universities, through the establishment of an infrastructure of mosques, schools, Islamic circles, Islamic centers, etc. And that is da'wah as it manifests itself today in the United States and in other places, and it's extremely successful.
Why does this matter to Americans?
It's very important for Americans to understand that it's a process of subversion. It's a subversion of the foundational principles of America. It's a subversion of the institutions of America. And one thing you see today with these ongoing so-called protests and the attendant virulent anti-Semitism is that you see, if you allow da'wah to go on unchecked and misunderstood, that it becomes a grassroots movement where young people become programmed with the agenda for da'wah. And da'wah also, and da'is, Muslim activists, have learned over time that they won't get to this Islamization of societies on their own. They have to find alliances. And one willing alliance has been with the far left. It's been with what we call the woke. So through this program, for instance, of diversity, equity, and inclusion, the activist Muslims propagating da'wah have made leaps and bounds. And so if you want to have a young generation programmed on the one hand with woke ideas and on the other hand with Islamist ideas and their fusion, and that becomes your elite for the future, an elite that is going to be in charge of our universities, our schools, our corporations, etc. On the long term, you can see the kind of damage it could do and it would do.
What has happened to cities like Dearborn and Hamtramck, which have Muslim majorities in the United States?
Well, what you see is, first of all, that these Muslim majorities have been exposed to da'wah, turned away through this activism from being just normal, peace-loving American Muslims going about their business, and many of them have been turned into Islamists with an agenda to Islamize. And so the first thing that you see is that there is this transition of American Muslims who, when I came to the United States in 2006, American Muslims were, generally speaking, different from European Muslims. And Americans were proudly telling me, our Muslims in America, they're assimilated. We don't have any of these issues that you have in Europe, that you have in France and in Britain and in the Netherlands, etc., because our American Muslims, they love the flag, they love the Constitution, and they have no problems with Jewish communities, Christian communities. And of course, in America, we do have a fringe, a small group of Muslims who are radical and who are jihadi, and we're watching them. But the body of the Muslim community is very much American. And that is not the case anymore. So the first and foremost is American Muslims have been persuaded, they've been changed. And with that, I think American Muslims are manifesting the same problems of a parallel society that adapts to Sharia law and that has formed ghettos of their own, that are very anti-Semitic or express Jewish hatred and express a hatred for America. So in 2006, it was unthinkable for a man born and raised in Michigan to shout to a large group of a Muslim audience, death to America and death to Israel. And in 2024, this is happening, and that is a clear-cut result of years of da'wah.
How significant is the Islamist movement in the United States?
I think it is very significant, but you will have to talk to other groups who keep tabs on this. What I have seen is a proliferation of Muslim activism in schools and in universities and online. All you have to do is go and find the various networks. And this proliferation was possible, number one, financially speaking, through the combination of foreign money, but also through an understanding. Islamists are becoming really sophisticated in taking advantage of the rights and freedoms that America offers not only to religious groups, but to all sorts of civil society groups. They're becoming very sophisticated in taking advantage of, again, I go back to the woke, where these radical Marxists, identity-based groups are constantly telling us that society is divided into groups and each group has these rights and we have to give them these benefits, rights, exemptions from taxes, open institutions to them, give them not through merit but through diversity, given positions of power. Islamists are taking advantage of all of these things. So you can see a proliferation which in many ways is very difficult to quantify. But if we wanted to quantify it, we could do it. But in order to do it, we would have to set aside the DEI obstacles and the obstacle of Islamophobia. Islamophobia is a smear word that's invented years ago to stop any kind of scrutiny, any kind of assessment and forensic look into the distinction between Muslims who are peace-loving and who have no subversion agenda and those with a subversion agenda.
How dangerous is it for journalists to discuss Islam in this way? And can you talk a bit about your own experiences in talking about this issue?
So it is dangerous, and there are two types of danger. One is the physical danger, where people are threatened and threatened to be killed. They are doxxed. They are, in my example, of course, there is the tragic death of Theo van Gogh, with whom I made a film in 2004 in the Netherlands. And that was followed by threats to his life that were carried through. And I have been living with security ever since then. So there is that physical threat. But there is another threat, again, that rides on cancel culture, rides on what the woke are doing, which is books that are published. In 2024, everybody in America and in the Western world should know everything about da'wah, about the concept of da'wah and gradualist process of Islamizing institutions and society. Everyone should know that. But you don't know it, you're not familiar with it, because the individuals who have done this research have been smeared as Islamophobes and they've been shut down. It's very difficult to come by publications of these studies, and the only people who are allowed to speak about Islam are the people who are not critical of the activist Muslims. So if you combine these two threats, one the physical threat, the other one the shaming and the smearing of those who study radical Islam and radical Islamist activities, then what you get is a closing of the minds of Americans and American leaders, so they don't see the danger that is very much in front of them.
Has there been a media blackout around these issues?
Yes, absolutely. There's been a media blackout about these issues because, again, I go back to the woke that make it possible that anybody with a darker skin color, any minority, any foreign group, to criticize them or to look into their political agendas and into their subversion activities is to commit an act of racism or bigotry. It's to be Islamophobic, it's to be racist, you name it. And so the crisis of our media, the crisis of our institutions has been a godsend. It's been a great opportunity for Islamists to exploit.
Are the people coming from Muslim countries coming from places that are culturally and morally equivalent to the West?
No, the people who are fleeing the Middle East, South Asia, Africa, who identify as Muslim, are fleeing failed and failing states. And these failed and failing states have Sharia laws applied either informally, on the family level, community level, or from theocracies like Iran, for instance. So here's the paradox. You have millions and millions of Muslims who are fleeing their own societies in order to search for a better life. And they come to America and they come to other Western societies. And then they become radicalized and Islamized on American soil, because the only infrastructure that is really preaching a message, a moral framework, a message of this is how to live, that is the Islamists. Some of them, obviously, when they go to university and other schools, they encounter the woke and they join that agenda. But there are very, very few other groups that are inviting new immigrants, regardless of their background, into becoming part of a religious movement or a religious moral political framework. It's at the moment only the Islamists.
Are they targeting, in terms of dawah, both red and blue states?
Dawah targets red and blue states, and dawah has now become so good and so developed, so strategic, that they have segmented the population of the country into different groups who should be targeted differently. So I have books that say this is dawah and this is how to approach the Hispanic community. And so you see today, this is insane, but it's true, that the largest number of individuals who are embracing Islam are Hispanic or African American. Or I mean, there was a chapter even on how to Islamize the Jewish community. So this is a well thought through idea strategy with a central message. It is key to understand that there's a central message, there's a central objective, but there is a diverse, very elaborate, decentralized strategy of how to get to that objective.
Is there a conservative alliance between Republicans and Islamists who are both worried about things like LGBT propaganda, LGBT flags? How does that work?
Superficially, yes. Superficially, Republicans and conservatives who are interested in protecting the family, protecting the rights of women, rights of the unborn child, protecting religious freedom, at times will think that they have something in common with those Muslims who are advancing da'wah. But what the conservatives and the Republicans fail to do is to see that the agenda that the activist Muslim is pushing is anti-Christian, it is anti-American, it is anti-Republican, and it is anti-church, of course. And so, in many ways, these coalitions are very interesting to watch. You see it on the other side, the strategy of some of the activist Muslims to ally themselves with the left. And then you see the rainbow movement, LGBTQ+. And these confrontations where suddenly you thought these activist Muslims were on your side, and within that framework of intersectionality, you are both fighting the white heterosexual oppressor, but here they are now, becoming much more right-wing and more conservative than anything you've ever seen. And somehow they've got to work through those differences. And it's very interesting to see these coalitions and to see how long and how far this carries through. But in my observation over the last decades in Europe and in here, but also in African countries and other countries, the Islamists always win because their message is central, they are committed to the long-term agenda, and it's been going on for a very, very long time. It's a very well-established message, centuries old. And so it is, and the money, both foreign and domestic, the charity system, there are 5 principles in Islam. You confess to the Shahada, you say, I am a Muslim, you have to pray 5 times a day, you have to fast the month of Ramadan, and you have to collect the zakat, or charity. Every Muslim is obligated to give at least 2.5% of their wealth, regardless of how big that wealth is. And then, of course, you have to go to Mecca at least once a year in your life if you can afford that. Now, if you go to the zakat and you look at the amount of money you can collect simply from that, and you ask yourself, who is doing the collecting? And once the money is collected, what is it spent on? Then you can see that there's almost no other group in the world who has resources like that for all time. And then on top of that, you have money that's raised from governments, that's raised from wealthy people, that is raised through, in open societies like America and the UK, through from governments that do spend money on civil society. And so it's things like this that I think that most observers miss when they focus only on jihadi groups, only on the groups that use force.
Under Joe Biden, millions of illegal immigrants have come into America. How has this impacted Islam and dawah?
So immigration is something that is one of the most controversial, combustible issues that we can discuss today. But there's the old-fashioned immigration, people leaving places where life is hard and moving to places where they think they can improve their lives. Let's set that aside. And then, of course, there's family reunion and family formation. Let's set that aside. And then there's economic immigration, where you have a lot of companies here looking for people that they can't find locally, and then trying to get them to come from other countries and take jobs temporarily, and then eventually maybe go back, maybe settle here. It doesn't matter. Let's set that aside as well. But immigration now is also a tool, a weapon for countries and non-state actors with the objective of subverting our societies. Putin uses this very well. Erdogan has used this against Europe a few times. And of course, Hamas and radical Islamist organizations also make use of this. Right now, there is a debate about bringing people from Gaza and from the Palestinian territories to America as refugees. And you run again into the smears of Islamophobia and racist, this and that, if you simply ask the question, but who exactly are we going to bring in? And who is in charge of vetting them? Can we ask these questions? And you will see that the loudest voices and the most effective voices when it comes to the Biden administration are the ones who shut down the debate, because you have this alliance between the woke, Rashida Tlaib, AOC, Ilhan Omar, this group of people who have hijacked the Democratic Party through Bernie Sanders. When Bernie Sanders in 2016, when he primaried Hillary Clinton and she lost the election, everyone focused on Donald Trump. And Donald Trump is this big, shiny object, this magnet for attention, and no one is looking at anyone else other than Trump. No one is looking at Bernie Sanders. No one is looking at the people that the Bernie Sanders brought into the Democratic Party and the way that party is subverted. And then these people, it is so interesting that in 2016 and beyond, there were people in Washington, D.C. who are saying that they are pro-social, they're socialists, pro-socialism, that they are communists, that they have these heroes of communism as their heroes. And so no scrutiny has been, I think sufficient scrutiny has been paid to this group, and the Islamists come in and ride along with them.
Are you concerned about the Palestinian refugees coming to the United States?
If the Palestinian refugees are small children and women who have been vetted and who are going to be brought here, and they are going to be assimilated into American society, into the ideas of freedom and equality for women and men, and for tolerance and pluralism, that is one thing. But that is not what I think we are seeing. What we are seeing is we're going to get Hamas fighters, we're going to get Palestinian Islamic Jihad members, we're going to get radical, hardened, militant Islamists to come into America through the asylum and refugee process and exploit the system to lend a hand to those activist militant Muslims who are anti-Semitic and anti-American and with an agenda to Islamize our society.
Are you worried about the fact that foreign wars are now dominating American and British elections over domestic issues?
Absolutely. I mean, it speaks for itself. in both the United Kingdom and in the United States, you see that the election is going to be influenced and perhaps even to a certain point swung by what's happening in the Middle East or what's going on in Ukraine or issues other than the, what do you say, cost of living, bread and butter issues, which is normally what elections are about. And so if I look at people in New York where we are now shouting Genocide Joe, and a member of the Democratic Congress advising voters to abstain from voting for her own party, then I think we've entered a new insanity. And I really hope that this polarization that we are facing, this tribalism that we're facing in America, that fades and that we have to look at the real enemy in the eye. And the real enemy in the eye is this resurgent, subversive Marxism that is active on our universities, married to radical Islamic activism that think that they can take over America through peaceful means and in unity with one another.
In 2016, Donald Trump won the state of Michigan by about 10,000 votes. How important is the Muslim vote in American elections?
Oh, very, very crucial. If elections get that close, I think Biden and his administration is toast, because the Muslim societies, the Muslim communities have been brainwashed into thinking that what's happening in the Middle East is more important to them than what's happening locally. And they will either have a Trump administration to deal with, or the Democratic Party they're going to have a face-off with the Democratic Party, because for the leadership of, the senior leadership of the Democratic Party, many of them Jewish, here is the question. Is Rashida Tlaib, Ilhan Omar, the Squad, are these people actually Democrats? Question mark.
Is Joe Biden and the Democrats pandering to the Muslims on the issue of Gaza?
I think, yes, they are pandering to them, because they do desperately need to win this election, and this election is going to be very close. And this election, again, is about the border. It's about crime. It's about the chaos that we see on our campuses. And it's also about the factors that led to the victory of Donald Trump in 2016. The decline in middle class, people all over America feeling that they've been forgotten, that they've been cast aside, and that their lives are not improving in any way, shape, or form, and don't feel listened to, mocked. I do remember that moment when Hillary Clinton was talking about the baskets of deplorables. And so those people who've been labeled baskets of deplorables, the issues that were a problem for them in 2016 have barely been addressed. No apology has been made to them by the Democratic Party. So if you take that all together, you can see why the Democratic Party is going to be punished at the ballot box.
Why do places like Hamtramck and Dearborn matter to Americans?
It's, I would say a cross-section of America. It's the middle of America. It is industrial America. It's the heart of America. And if radical Islamists and lefties take these places, I think then that creates a crisis in the American identity. You have to keep going back to what exactly is America? Who are we? Creedal America is a Christian country. It's a country that was founded on these principles of liberty and freedom, equality, the rule of law, free markets. When these groups take over, that's not at least not the founding identity of America.
How do you assess the demographic shifts that have happened to America in recent years?
I'm very pessimistic about this demographic shift. It is a demographic shift, number one, that brings in people who are going to depend on the system for entitlements and welfare payments that are going to cost the system not only to house and so on, but also in terms of enforcing the rule of law. And then it's an immigration that brings in or enhances, enforces all these rogue anti-American ideologies. So this particular wave of immigration is not a good wave of immigration for America.
How do these demographic trends and shifts impact American domestic politics? Do they favor the Republicans or the Democrats?
Well, the Democrats are banking on the fact that this particular wave is going to help them, or that immigration in general helps them. But you see now, if you assess, for instance, the way Hispanics are voting today, or Chinese communities, or other Asian communities, that immigrants do come from failed or failing states. Many of them flee radical Sharia, many of them flee radical communism. And so over time, I think that those communities will tend to vote Republican, and they will tend to vote for the party that is about the preservation of family, where small business, medium-sized businesses can thrive, and where parties that are in favor of quality education. And right now, everything I've said is not things that are associated with the Democratic Party. But again, there is this hope, this strategy that many of the Democratic Party are clinging to, that by bringing in waves, millions and millions of people, and quickly giving them voting rights, that they're going to win the next election. And I think they're simply going to alienate the existing base, while at the same time creating chaos and confusion. And I think on a moral level, it's very important to note that it's wrong to use human beings as tools to win an election, or to boost your momentary political agenda and then abandon them afterwards.
Is there a clash of civilizations occurring?
The clash of civilizations has been occurring since at least 1989. We had, before 1989, during the Cold War, the two superpowers, and when that world order ended, the next one, that's disorder that is emerging, is one between civilizations competing, at times civilizations collaborating, where they think collaboration is important in the short term for those engaged in such collaborations. And then there is a clash, and there is definitely a clash of civilizations between Islam and the West, and that has been going on for a time. And it seems now as if that clash is not only sort of a Cold War type or America managing the clash, but it looks at the moment as if the Islamists are actually managing the clash.
Can you give people some context as to your own experiences with Islam?
Well, I was born and raised within Islam, and I would describe the early years of my childhood. I grew up in a community, a Somali community, that identified as Muslim. I don't want to say we were peace-loving, because we were busy fighting amongst ourselves as clans, but religion wasn't a tool. Our Islamic identity wasn't in any way, shape or form part of the clashes that we were having as clans. We were fighting over resources, we were fighting for power, we were fighting over territory, and we were all fighting against, in my environment, we were fighting against the dictatorship of Mohammad Siad Barre, that had allied himself with the Soviet Union and brought communism on our soil. And that destroyed us. But in the mid-1980s, we found groups from the Middle East coming with a different flavor of Islam, the Islam of Dawah, the Islam that is political, and not just political, but it's a totalitarian form of Islam. Every aspect of your society, of your community has to be Islamized. Sharia law has to be imposed and enforced. That's the sort of Islam that the Muslim Brotherhood brought into my community. And at one time I became a member of that movement and believed in the righteousness of what they were doing. And that is the time when I talk about 1989, when Salman Rushdie was the victim of a fatwa issued by Ayatollah Khomeini, who was the supreme leader of Iran. And so as a teenager, I believed in that stuff. And I practiced it, and now I'm ashamed of it. I also believed in all the Jewish hatred that we were marinated in. And again, there are lots and lots of Muslims, ex-Muslims, peace-loving Muslims today who are coming out just like me and saying we reject this stuff. But we don't have a foothold. We're not as well organized. We don't have as much money, resources, or backing as we would need to fight the da'is, to fight those activist Muslims who are engaged in da'wah.
If America continues on this trajectory, what do you think the future holds for the country?
It is, again, balkanization. I mean, you have to look at everywhere where these radical Islamists have touched, have control, near control, or where they've had an effect on their societies. What you get is chaos, you get violence, you get the subjugation of women, and sometimes you get extreme violence. People in America and in the West are forgetful, but ISIS, the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, was only taken down in 2018. And if you have to show people images of what they were doing. They were beheading people that disagreed with them and their religious path. They put a Muslim man in Jordan in a cage and set him on fire. They took Yazidi women as slaves and raped them and sold them. They took innocent journalists and beheaded them. Everywhere where they were, they wreaked havoc. They took children, boys, and turned them into child soldiers. Hamas does the same thing. Hamas takes children and indoctrinates them using money that's raised from Western societies, money that's raised from America via UNRWA. And these UNRWA schools, they are used to fill these children's heads with hatred. And then the violence is self-perpetuated. And you are going to have, if you give full license to activist Muslims in America, these are the types of things that they're going to bring to America.
In Britain, David Amess, the Member of Parliament, was killed by an Islamist recently, but it seems like many people have forgotten his death. Do you think people in the West generally are too forgetful of Islamic terrorism and violence?
Or the American, British, Western amnesia of these things is breathtaking. It's breathtaking because, yes, you talk about the Member of Parliament in the UK who was knifed to death, by the way, by a Somali immigrant who was radicalized in England. But we also forget, if you look at these young people on campuses wearing kefirs, they've forgotten what happened on the 7th of October. That's only a few months ago. A few months ago, at this Nova concert in Israel, the people who were at that concert listening to music, many of them were peaceniks. They were young peaceniks. They were in kibbutzim. They were actually leftists up to a point. And the women were raped and mutilated. Men were shot, babies, grandmothers. All of that seems to have been forgotten. There is something really afoot in the West and among young people that is absolutely shocking. I don't know what is going on in our schools and our universities. I remember the young woman right after the October 7 event on TikTok in the middle of the country here in the United States who said she loved bin Laden. Her eyes were opened by bin Laden. I mean, there is that going on, and we are watching it, and we are wringing our hands on the sideline. But it's a real crisis, I think. It's a real moral crisis. And when you have a moral vacuum like this, it's natural for that vacuum to be filled by some power. And right now, the two forces that are vying for that vacuum, the moral vacuum that we created in America and the rest of the West, it is a radical resurgence of identity-based communism and radical Islam.
And finally, one last question. What do you say to those who are shouting slogans including death to America, revolution, intifada, and so on?
Take some time and go and live in some of these countries where intifada is prevailing, where Sharia law is the law of the land. I say this particularly to the young women and the LGBTQ community. Go and just try it out among the Taliban and among Hamas, even in Egypt, any part of the Middle East. Go try your luck there, see how it works out, and then come back and tell me if you're still shouting death to America.
Thank you so much, Ayaan, for joining us. I really appreciate your time.